Welcome to the Tammy Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. I am Tammy Mac. Tonight we are talking about why President Joe Biden gave ICE $86.9 million. Why Georgia is facing Jim Crow 2.0. Why a popular relationship expert who dispensed advice from his car, they call him the car counselor, is being put on blast, and why the introduction of two Muppets is receiving praise. It's Friday, y'all. That means I'm bringing my Friday favorites back. The business of being black are headlining politic trends or headlining political trends of the week. Please welcome my Friday co-host, the co-founder of the Anti-Racism Kentucky Coalition, Dr. O.J. Oleka, comedian and filmmaker Alicia Cooper. And tonight we also have activist and radio personality Dominique DiPrima. Ed Sanders will not be with us tonight, but he will be missed and thought of in our hearts as he handles his family business with the kids tonight. So Ed, be the great father that you are. See, they say there are no good black men out there, good black fathers. Ed's one. Dr. Oleka's one. Every time I turn around, I see a bam, bam. I see a good black father. Every time I turn around, it's a good black father.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. So let's, in the words of MC Hammer, let's get it started. According to CNN, tens of thousands of immigrants from Central America and Mexico, including thousands of unaccompanied minors, are journeying to the border in February. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection said it tracked over 100,000 migrants crossing the southern border, almost a 30% increase over January. Yet on Monday, White House press secretary refused to characterize the situation as a crisis, instead calling it a circumstance. Are we still facing an immigration crisis, or are we facing an immigration circumstance? Dr. Oleka, kick us off.
Well, we are facing a crisis, and it is one entirely made up of President Joe Biden. I mean, this wasn't an issue before until Joe Biden said, sure, come on over. If you are a migrant child, we welcome you into the United States. And look, I mean, this is an issue that I think is very personal for a lot of us. I'm the child of immigrants. I think it is important that we support the immigrant community. However, we cannot continue to tell folks to come across the border and not have a clear plan for them, because what it does is it sends this signal that the United States can take in people that it can't. We don't have a situation that's ready for them to be positive. And in fact, you have Joe Biden using the same policies that President Trump did and President Obama did with putting kids in cages. I guess it was bad when Trump did it, but it's just a circumstance when Joe Biden does it.
You know, I really like you, Dr. Oleka, but I just don't expect you to blatantly lie. That's just not the truth. If it's a crisis, it's a crisis we've had in place for decades. We have a cyclical surge of immigrants that come to this country. We just had a huge earthquake, a hurricane, in Honduras in November, just several months ago. That is still a crisis that is devastating that country. You have the ongoing drug cartel activity ever since we closed down Miami. They come through Central America to supply the drug market in the United States. Those drug cartels are now trafficking in people. The coyote is not the one guy with a car you used to imagine. No, they're now organized cartels that are trafficking in human beings. And that is the problem. And it's funny how Republicans want to have it both ways. They want to say that Joe Biden is welcoming people, even though he told people not to come. They want to say that all these people are coming because Biden's policies are different. But then out the other side of their mouth, they say that Biden is doing the same policies as Trump. You can't have it both ways. No, we don't have enough room for all of the unaccompanied minors at the border, and they are making accommodations. And there is a difference in policy. They're not putting the kids in cages, and they're not separating them from their families. What they are doing is when they come on their own alone, they're not turning them away to go back on their own, traveling somewhere through Central America. That is the difference.
I have no idea why you are not President Joe Biden's press secretary, but I think
well, Jen Psaki's doing a good job.
Yeah,
they don't need me.
Yeah, this is a major crisis. The public school systems are already overly crowded. You know, so it's already a big problem. And a Republican friend of mine said to me, he said, I have to admit to you, he said, we Republicans started this problem in the 80s under Ronald Reagan. He said, we all wanted this cheap labor, and that's where it began. So it's not Democrats that started this stuff. This started with the 80s greed under the Reagan administration, 8 years. And some people didn't even get confirmations because they were found to have illegals in their homes. So again,
I agree with you about Reagan, but what do you mean the public schools are overcrowded? Where? Because in California, we have room in our schools, and the immigrant children are not what's crowding the schools. Immigrants pay taxes. Immigrants do work. And
I'm not saying immigrants are the reason that they're overcrowded, but it's a lot of schools in Maryland and other states where they're already overcrowded without immigrants in them, without a large immigrant population. There's a lot of schools that already are overcrowded in DC and other places. I'm not blaming immigrants. I'm just saying that there's a lot of places, a lot of states that already have way more students in them than teachers. And the teachers have been complaining about this for a while. So even with the American citizens, there's a lot of overcrowding going on. So we've got to figure out a way to handle all this stuff. And I don't know what the solution is, but it's definitely, something's going to have to happen because it's getting worse more than it's getting better.
In reality, it's not getting worse. Fewer people immigrate now. And, it's partly because our economy hasn't been so great and because of the pandemic. Right now, you're dealing with multiple crises, hurricane and such. So you are seeing some people at the border. But if you look at the past 5-10 years, it's not getting worse, actually.
Tammy Mac, I find it incredibly fascinating that now everybody is speaking the talking points of one Donald J. Trump. When you say things like, well, we have to do something at the border. Well, there's a crisis at the border. Wow, this started in the 80s. This has been happening for decades. These are the things that Trump said. So I think, again, it's kind of fascinating.
I didn't call it a crisis at the border. You didn't hear any of those points from me, Olega.
No, Alicia did.
I said that, but what I'm saying is that even though Trump may have said there's a crisis at the border, the way he tried to go about it wasn't the best way to go about it either.
Sure, that can certainly be true, but it's important to understand.
Separating kids from their parents is not the way to go about this.
If you look at the reports and you actually look at photos, when you see the kids that are in the Joe Biden facilities now, they are overcrowded. Some of them have masks, some of them don't. What I'm saying is this is difficult policy. It was difficult with Trump. It's difficult with Biden. It was difficult with Obama. And as Dominique pointed out, it's been difficult since the 80s. But this is a crisis, make no mistake. And so when the press secretary says it's a circumstance, this is politics. And I think it's quite embarrassing that reporters would just allow her to say these things and not check her on it.
Well, I think it's quite embarrassing that you say a lot of things and, well, people do check you. But the point is, we have to look at the impact of some of these Trump policies. Like, I actually have been to Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador and seen those situations with my own eyes. And I actually have a lot of information about this particular issue. And a lot of the problem that we're dealing with right now is the result of the Trump defunding of diplomacy and programs that we had in place that were working in Central America, that were making sure that immigrants could stay in their home countries, that they would be safer from the drug cartels, that they would have more opportunities, and that there would be programs for these children to have a way to survive. And Trump defunded all that. And so now, between that and the crises, which Trump did not help with, there was no aid for that hurricane. Guess what? They're at the border. That's one reason. But again, I don't see it as a crisis. I see it as a long time kicking the can down the road. And let's woman up and get this done, get some new policy passed.
I want to go into the chat room here real quick because they have a lot to say. Yolanda says it's a crisis. Therese says, no. Dr. OJ, where you get your weed from?
Mexico.
Our soulmate says we cannot keep taking in people and give, and then have no place to put them. Alicia is right. Hold on. Alicia, Miss Cooper is right. Thank you. Yes, New York is very overcrowded. What about the trauma the children are facing? The same traumatized students I will have to teach. I hate it. So Dinah Jackson is on your side there, Alicia. And Therese says, Dominique, you look beautiful. 27.
Oh, thank you.
Biden administration has awarded ICE an $86.9 million contract. The money will be used to provide temporary shelter and processing services for families crossing the border without authorization and in the process of being removed from our country. According to Fox Business, they were also given comprehensive health assessment, including COVID-19 testing, therapeutic regimens, educational resources, and mental health care. Whew, I'm gonna have to stay out of this one. It's gonna make me look bad. Dominique?
I mean, what alternative do we have right now? I mean, even to Diamond, that, you know, with our soulmates, I get that it's a burden on teachers, maybe for you, but what is the alternative? We're talking about unaccompanied minors. What that means is children traveling on their own over hundreds and hundreds of miles. So what do we say? Look, you're breaking the rules. Go back to Honduras, kid. You know, these are human beings. These are children. And we are, you know, whether you're Christian, Muslim, whatever your faith, we are people of faith and we are people of morality. And you don't kick kids to the curb. You figure it out.
But Dominique, I do want to ask though, there are rules in place. There are rules in place in several countries. Mm-hmm. And so then why does it become okay to break the rules in certain circumstances?
But we're not talking about breaking the rules. We're talking about people who come here seeking refugee status. And there is a process.
But regardless of the why, they are still breaking the rules, no?
No, because when you come to a country seeking refugee status, it means you're fleeing for your life. And you are in imminent danger. And then there are rules that allow you to ask to stay as a refugee. When you're in a refugee, that means you're in an emergency. You can't just write a letter and say,
so you believe that
the danger about to chop my head off. Can I come in 3 months? Huh?
Do you believe that everyone who comes into America are seeking asylum?
No, but most of those people that we're dealing with at the border, and definitely those children, are seeking asylum. That's why they come. And yes, there's a backlog. We need more judges in those immigration courts. We've had backlogs with our refugee scenario for years and years and years. And we need to speed up that processing. Whether they get to stay or they don't get to stay has to be decided, and they have to be processed. And that is part of the system of the rules. Trump changed the rules and said you have to stay in Mexico. That had never been that way before. That was a new rule.
Well, and now that's thought, Dr. Oleka. We got to take a quick break. We'll come right back on the Tammy Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Tammy Mac Show. Welcome back to the Tammy Mac Late Show on Fox Soul, where we have our Friday favorites, Dominique DiPrima, Dr. Oleka, and Alicia Cooper. Ed Sanders is not with us today. He's out hanging with the family. All right, a couple of soccer games and then some, I guess. Look, tonight we are rounding out the week with weekly trends and topics. Yolanda says, why is the USA responsible for providing aid to so many? I saw a man with amputated legs, probably a vet, begging for money. Why are we not providing for him? Dr. Oleka, I know you wanted to speak on the way out, so let's speak on it.
Well, and Tammy Mac, this is the difficulty, and I think it's really important that the soulmates understand this, because, again, if you are a migrant person who comes here illegally, there's no guarantee that you are actually going to get any services. I mean, people have done research on this all the time. Those folks can get paid under the table. They get paid at discount wages because they don't have representation. They can't be supported. It's not necessarily a better deal for them to be here. Also, when you look at it across the board, we do have folks who are existing citizens within the United States who don't have a lot of resources, who need a lot of support. Again, I think it is incredibly important that we support immigrants that come to the United States. My parents were two immigrants that did that. My wife's mother is an immigrant who did that as well. But we do not have unlimited resources. And so when you have a Mexico first policy, is that if you're seeking asylum, you stay in Mexico first. It allows the United States to work with the Mexican government to process folks to get them back home. Trump did this. Everybody said it was a terrible policy. And guess what? Joe Biden has now said, if you're not going to come here or you can't come here, you have to stay in Mexico. So again, this thing becomes very complicated. And I think to just say everybody is welcome in the United States because this is a moral issue and this is the greatest country in the world, if you don't have the resources, you cannot support everybody. And we've seen that time and time again.
Alicia, let's talk about this money, this 80-something, what's the number here? Let me get it right. $86.9 million contract with ICE. Let's talk about that. How do you feel about that money going to ICE?
Well, I mean, something has to be done. You know, from what I understood, they're putting them in hotels and getting them certain resources and medical care and COVID tests and things that, I mean, they're going to do legitimate things with that money. And in the grand scheme of things, 86 million isn't a whole lot considering how big this is. But, you know, I mean, something has to be done. I mean, you know, I don't know what else to say. I mean, yes, we do understand that American citizens could use that 86 million, but we can't just act like they don't get anything because they're not American citizens. It's only going to get worse. So I think it sounds like a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things.
Okay. Biden also said he is ready to look at reforming the Senate filibuster in a major way. He believes it is inherently racist and is being abused. However, the Democratic Party used it liberally during the Trump administration. So, Dominique, how are we feeling about this filibuster?
Well, I think we have no choice but to reform it. I do understand that it can be a double-edged sword. You know, what it means is that when you're in the minority, you have less power. But I do agree with President Barack Obama that it is a relic of, you know, the Jim Crow South, because it allows a tyranny of the minority. And we already have that in the Senate, because each state gets 2 senators, regardless of how many people are in the state, which means places like California, where I'm from, are wildly underrepresented. Places with more people of color, BIPOC people, are wildly underrepresented already. And when you allow the filibuster, especially the lazy filibuster, where senators don't even have to get on the floor and argue, don't even have to show up for work to grind to a halt voting rights or the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, you got to do something or we won't be able to get anything done. And Republicans will keep up with their "don't let Black people vote" agenda that we've seen in Georgia.
President Biden was a relentless defender of the filibuster during his 36 years in the Senate. Dr. Oleka, why the reversal now?
Well, the reversal because he is a politician who doesn't have any real principles. But to what Dominique said, I think it's really important that soulmates understand the purpose of the United States Senate. The House is designed for population representation so that big states have more people in the House and they can pass votes based on the passions of the day because they are elected and reelected every 2 years. The Senate is designed to be the opposite, to be equal representation of all 50 states. They're elected every 6 years, and they are supposed to deliberate. They're supposed to do things slowly. If you get rid of the filibuster, and this isn't me saying this is the minority leader of the United States Senate, when the shoe was on the other foot, you will see pro-life federal bills. You will see right to work at the federal level. You'll see elimination of taxes all across the board, and you'll see conservative legislation that happens. And then you'll see the reversal 2 years later. This is not good for the country if you get rid of the filibuster. It also isn't racist by definition or by design. Yes, the Democrats in the 1960s and beyond used it to try and block civil rights legislation. But again, to say that it is specifically racist is a misunderstanding of the filibuster and a misunderstanding of what the Senate is there for.
I'm glad you understand it better than President Barack Obama. I think that the Senate may have been set up that way, but in reality, we are supposed to be a direct democracy. And that lack of proportional representation at this point means a tyranny of the minority, and the minority being white men and conservative white men who you happen to agree with.
Well, again, I always think it's very strange when you have Black folks arguing for less power for the minority. I mean, let's take this concept and apply it to the
minority is white supremacist.
You
it's
had
not
a
strange.
If you had a board that had 9 people and 4 of them were Black and 5 people wanted to do something that was antithetical to those Black views, in this world where there's no filibuster, those 4 people don't matter. Their perspective is irrelevant. And in the United States Senate, that would be the case. Again, I ask you, I don't think this is what voters want. I don't think they want one-party rule every 2 years to entirely change the federal government. There is supposed to be compromise. There are supposed to be people working together. And just for the record, it's not Republicans only who want to keep the filibuster. Joe Manchin wants to keep the filibuster. Kirsten Sinema wants to keep the filibuster. And Biden has gone back and forth on this, and who knows where he will actually land. It would be bad, very bad policy, and I think the country would regret it as soon as they did it.
Sinema and Manchin are really conservative Democrats, so they're really like Republicans. And just because we modify or get rid of the filibuster doesn't mean we can't have compromise. Mitch McConnell is the one threatening everybody with scorched earth. You can still negotiate and be bipartisan without the filibuster. You just have to have the mentality to do it.
I don't know that I don't know that negotiating and being bipartisan exist in our in our world today, in our government anymore. I really don't. I haven't seen it in the last, I can't even count the years now. I haven't seen it in quite some time. I didn't see it during President Obama's administration. I didn't see it during Trump's administration, and we're not seeing it during Biden's administration either. And I'm saying regardless of which side is which, there have been very few bipartisan efforts on either part.
You see it among the people. You don't see it among the politicians.
There it is. Georgia is one of the first states to pass major voting restrictions after last year's election. Republican legislators around the country are advancing similar measures. The new law adds a host of restrictions like requiring identification for mail voting, deciding to end at 5 p.m. and making it illegal to give food or water to voters in line. Republican Governor Brian Kemp signed the bill into law immediately, calling it common sense legislation, while aligning himself with former President Donald Trump while promoting the bill. Is this common sense legislation, Dr. Olega?
Well, Tammy Mac, first I want to say I think it's really important that the Republican Party tries to win as many votes as possible. I think we can. I think if we talk about the issues, then we do.
You can. You certainly can if you start cheating.
Well, one of the things that I think is really interesting, if you actually read this bill, which I did, all 95 pages, and you start to look through the reforms, you see things that are actually pretty common sense, in fact. It establishes a hotline with the Attorney General if there are improprieties in voting, which again I think is good for Black voters because the hotline tip is anonymous. It also creates an opportunity where if local elections have had malfeasance for 2 general elections in a row, then they can get taken over by the state. So again, you have issues where Black voters might be kept out. That can be reformed. It also gets rid of the signature matching issue, which means that if your signature, when you go to vote, doesn't match what they already have on file for you, then they can throw out your vote. There was research done in Florida that said that this happens to Black voters on a 2-to-1 basis. So that's now gone based on this bill. That's also good for Black voters. And again, I think it's one of these issues where people start to get political. They start to say things. They start to use phrases like this is Jim Crow 2.0. But I wonder if they've actually read the bill, because if you read it, you will see that there actually aren't a whole lot of things that are negative. The only thing that you can say is negative is if you don't like voter ID. But this bill just matches mail-in voting with in-person voting in Georgia. You have to have an ID. And if you don't already have one, the state will give you one for free.
Georgia Democrat Stacey Abrams, who I believe is, I can't be sure of it, but I believe she's probably read the bill, founder of the voting rights group Fair Fight, agrees. She released a statement saying the law is blatantly unconstitutional and nothing less than Jim Crow 2.0. Why is it we can't just make voting easier? Why do we have to have all of this? I mean, when you say call the Attorney General if something goes wrong, but if you're in a state that skews one way or another, calling the Attorney General is like calling your rapist saying, "Hey, can you help me?"
Well, here's
I can't call I very well can't call the person who's been ill towards me and expect them to help me.
Well, Tammy Mac, I want to offer a response to that just very quickly, because again, the Secretary of State, if you recall, in the 2020 election, was very adamant to say that Georgia is doing things by the book. Georgia is doing things the right way. This is a dyed-in-the-wool Republican who just cares about doing his job well. He, in fact, got yelled at by President Trump, and the Democrats won those 2 Senate seats. So I would imagine that most Republicans really just want to do their job. And I will say this just very quickly. This bill does expand voting, because what it does is it allows a whole weekend. The bill expands voting because it allows a whole weekend prior for you to go vote and allows 12 hours to do it, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That is incredibly important when you're talking about people trying to get to the polls for early voting. That is important. That is a good thing that this bill does.
If the Secretary of State said that there was nothing wrong with the voting process, then why even change it in the first place? We'll be right back on the Tammy Mac Late Show on Fox Soul.
Tammy Mac Show.
Okay, we're talking about Georgia and these voting laws that they just passed. The remixtress, our soulmate, says, how does outlawing food prevent voter fraud? The GOP isn't pretending anymore. They just hate democracy. Imagine criminalizing food and water, but not assault weapons. Ooh, 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 ooh. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, why stop people? Like literally, why include that in a bill? Period.
Right. Like who was complaining?
Included in a bill. What does water and food and sitting down in a chair have to do with voting?
Yeah, what does it have to do with securing stuff? And Dr. Lake, I thought y'all wanted smaller government. They sitting up here jumping in everybody's business. They gonna be like, no handing out Tic Tacs in the line, no gum. You know, like y'all like to say, well, where does this end? If you let gays get married, they're gonna start screwing their sheep. Where does this end? So it's like, well, where does this end? If you start with no food, no water, then it's gonna keep going. No gum, no mints. Where does this end? And how does stopping people from sharing water make the voting more secure? I don't understand. It's like they're just doing the dumbest stuff, throwing 1,000 things up against the wall. Most of it doesn't make sense to me. I know it makes sense to you, Dr. Laker, but I'm trying to figure out how water and food got in this thing. And it's ridiculous. Like they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And I want to know who all these criminals are that's running to vote illegal.
Yeah, last time I checked, the criminals ain't all that eager to go vote. While Governor Kemp was signing that law behind closed doors, Democratic State Representative Park Cannon was arrested and dragged through the Capitol in handcuffs by Capitol Police for knocking on Kemp's door. Take a look at the clip.
Are you serious?
No, you are not. Represent.
She's not under arrest.
For what? Under arrest for what? For trying to see something that our governor is doing? Our governor is signing a bill that affects all Georgians, and you're going to arrest an elected representative.
Well, I can't help but to think on January 6th, there was an insurrection at the Capitol that saw absolutely no arrest on that same day. And here we have a Black woman trying to knock on the door, get into the governor's office to watch him sign a bill that he supports, exclusively, get arrested. Cannon has since shared tweets thanking her supporters. She tweeted, "Hey everyone, thank you for your support. I've been released from jail. I am not the first Georgian to be arrested for fighting voter suppression. I'd love to say I'm the last, but we know that isn't true."
I was going to say Representative Cannon is facing 2 felonies, up to 8 years in jail for knocking on a door. And Governor Kemp is already up there lying, saying she kicked and beat police officers when she barely got to even knock on the door. And it's true, they dragged her out of there like she was some kind of criminal. They were rougher on her than they were on Dylan Roof when she was just trying to knock on a door and see what was going on. And it's so clear to me, the Republican Party does not want Black people to vote. The Republican Party does not want Black people to vote.
Well, you want to say it again?
Yeah. The Republican Party doesn't want Black people to vote. It's obvious. And to say that they're expanding the vote is pure talking points. They've gotten rid of they've narrowed down the drop boxes where you can just drop your ballot. There's a lot of things here that are very antithetical to voting rights. And one of them is the ID requirement. That should be going away, not getting more restrictive. Why would you be limiting mail-in voting? It's clearly problematic, and we need to pass the For the People Act, HR 1, so we can standardize instead of letting these southern states bring back their little Jim Crow poll tax and whatever else they have up their sleeve and making it back to the good old post-Reconstruction racist days. No, we need to have HR 1 and standardize our voting rights.
Here's a great idea from one of our soulmates. Maybe instead of Republicans worrying about handing out water to people in 3-hour lines, why not try to prevent 3-hour lines so there is no need to hand out water? Now that is common sense.
Well, that's what the bill does when it expands voting on the weekends for 12 hours a week earlier. If people are able to vote on the weekends, then there doesn't have to be a crowding during the weekday. But look, I want to say—
Why would we take away ballot drop boxes, Dr. Oleka? Why is that a good thing?
Well, and I want to respond to that, Dominique, because shockingly, I think you're right on this. I think that is one aspect of the bill that is very bad. I don't know why that's in there. And I also think the criminalization of food and water is also mean-spirited. Those are two things specifically that don't need to be in the bill. Also, when you arrest an elected official who's a black woman who's knocking on the door, these are the types of self-inflicted wounds that then people focus on. You don't get to actually debate the merits of good legislation because you've done dumb things. And so what I would say to my party is focus on the merits of the bill that are good, take out the silly stuff that is unnecessarily cruel, and don't arrest people because they disagree with the legislation that
like
they
silly
themselves
stuff like allowing Republicans to now control and be able to throw out votes so they could overturn the election the next time a Trump or the new Trump comes along and wants to tell a big lie, they can more conveniently accommodate his cheating.
So let me ask you this, and anyone can answer. I always say, sometimes there are basketball games or football games, and the game is really, really close, right? And then somebody's team will say, if only Shaq would have made that free throw, we could have won, right? And my thought is, but if only you could have outplayed them, you could have won. Like, I never think the difference between a game is one free throw or one wrong play. The difference in a game to me is when you win it strong. So I want to ask, how can Democrats combat this bill that they have? Can Stacey Abrams put on a cape and come to the rescue of Georgia again for Democrats and the Black community by having Black folk come out and overwhelmingly vote in such a manner that they can't even contain it, even if they cheated? Or is that not possible?
We need to pass HR 1, the For the People Act, because when the cheating gets this serious, where they now have commissions and they have 10 days where they can overturn your votes. And you look at Brian Kemp, he shouldn't even be the governor of that state. He stole that election from Stacey Abrams when he was the Secretary of State running for governor, which is already super shady. And now he's passing this Jim Crow 2.0 bill. It's a domino effect, and it has to be stopped. And the way to do that is to standardize our voter rights so that hundreds of similar bills that are trying to pass in states across the country can be stopped in their tracks.
What do you think, Alicia? Oh, go ahead, Dr. Oleka.
Well, again, for the soulmates, I think it's really important that we talked about what was in the bill. We talked about the way that it expands voting opportunities. We talked about how it gets things to the Attorney General. We talked about how it actually does good things for Black voters with regard to signature matching, removing that hurdle. So when people call it Jim Crow 2.0, is in setting up a separate standard for Black voters, this is simply untrue. And when you're talking about HR 1, the federal bill that would standardize elections, let's talk about what's in that bill as well, because I think it's really important that you know. This bill, by definition, would allow your tax dollars to go to political opponents who are running for office. When you have a public campaign and you're allowed public spending that's paid for by taxpayers, do you want your dollars to go to somebody who does not agree with what you believe? It also takes the Federal Election Commission, which right now is a 3-3 split, Democrat and Republican. It makes it a 5-person member where you're actually having 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 1 appointed by the president. So if you have a president that you don't like who appoints the tiebreaker, do you really want that person in charge of federal election regulations? When you're talking about standardizing things across the board, you have to think about what that actually means. HR 1 has some good things in it, and this is, again, where I think bipartisanship is important, because you can actually focus on the things that most people agree on.
Yeah, what I'm interested in is the consequences of this all. I want to know who is going to be executing and implementing these no water rules, this no food rules. So now we're going to have police at every Black voting site arresting Black voters for having water and food. It makes it illegal to have water or food at voting sites, which means that police can arrest people and then they not be able to vote at all. That
shouldn't be legal.
This is not going to end well. I promise you that. Alicia, go.
Yeah, if you're diabetic or hypoglycemic or have things where you need to have water and nourishment, they can't outlaw that. You take a swig of water to save your life and then you're getting handcuffed. it's ridiculous. Like that. How do you even, who's to say how much water I can drink in a day? Like, I don't even know who thought this up and who thought it was a good idea, but that's absolutely ridiculous. There's some things you need for health reasons. Now, you don't need to break out a steak and cheese, but there's certain things that you're going to need in that day. And I don't think anybody should have the ability to tell you can't drink water in America. Stacey Abrams is right.
Yeah, I tell you what, everybody's talking about not wearing masks and how that ruins their civil rights to wear a mask. Well, I like to see all the people.
Nothing about them snatching people water out their throat.
Let's take a break and come right back on the Tammy Mac Late Show on Fox Soul.
Tammy Mac Show.
Welcome back to the Tammy Mac Late Show on Fox Soul, where we are tackling and highlighting the week in review with my guests Dominique DiPrima, Dr. Oleka, and Alicia Cooper. So let's get down to business about this relationship guru who cheated on his wife. Are my producers listening right now? Because I don't want to talk about this shit. Literally, I don't care to talk about it. Like, I don't want to use my platform for him. I just don't want to do it. I'm totally uninterested in using my platform to promote the brother. He got enough. I don't want to promote the Negro.
Well, Tammy, it's your show, so let's move on.
I'm just mad he had the wife show up in that daggone bonnet like she was the pine saw lady. That's why I don't want to promote it.
Yeah, I'm uninterested in it. I don't want to use my platform to talk about him. I just really don't. Let's move on. Let's talk about something a little more wholesome and something worthy of discussion. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street?
Through MLK Boulevard, apparently.
Sesame Street is joining the anti-racist movement. I'm not mad at that. I just hope they have good advisors because
Black Lives Matter Boulevard. I love the yellow brick road. Sesame Street has introduced 2 new Black Muppets to talk about race. Now, the show's new Muppets, 5-year-old Wesley Walker and his father, praise the Lord, they gave him a daddy, y'all. Elijah will teach parents and children about race and racism through their new ABCs of racial literacy. Let's take a look.
Elmo wants to know why Russ's skin is brown.
Oh, I know why, Elmo. My mom and dad told me. It's because of melanin. Right, Dad?
That's right.
Melanin? What's that?
Well, melanin is something that we each have inside our bodies that make the outside of our bodies the skin color that it is.
I'm gonna go first. I love Sesame Street. I've been living on Sesame Street all my life. To this day, I love Sesame Street. And Sesame Street, I honestly don't believe Sesame Street had to introduce Black characters because Sesame Street has always had Black people on Sesame Street. Holly Robinson Pete's dad was an integral part of Sesame Street. I mean, they brought Black folk on Sesame Street all the time. And honestly, the people who live on Sesame Street, they have no color. We don't know if Bert and Ernie was white or Hispanic or straight or gay. You know, the rumor is that Bert and Ernie was gay because they were sleeping in the bedroom together all the time. We didn't know, Big Bird was a bird. We didn't even know what Oscar the Grouch was. What was Oscar the Grouch? I have no idea what he was. I have no idea what Elmo is to this day. Oscar the Grouch was green. Elmo was red. Let me tell you why I have a problem with this clip, y'all. To ask why your skin is this color suggests that there's something wrong with it. I don't like that feeling because I think it needs to be played in a balanced way. I think you need to have somebody come and ask, why is your skin that color to a white character on Sesame Street? if that's how we're going to do it. I understand that it was a teaching moment for melanin and that kind of thing, but it suggests that you're different in a way that doesn't fit into society. I don't know if that's good or bad, but my skin kind of crawled when Elmo said, "Why is your skin that color?" I didn't like it. It took me back to the Little Rascals when they were trying to scrub the black off of buckwheat.
Yeah, and I mean, we've all gone to integrated schools. No white person has ever asked me why my skin was this color. Kids don't care.
But they've asked me why my hair looked like that.
Oh yeah, they're asking about our hair, but as far as skin, they don't care. They just want to play. So I mean, I understand. I think they had good intentions for it, but it was just a little weird.
Dominique?
It was just a little weird.
It's not just a little weird. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Alicia, but I also think Tammy's got a point, because that suggests that the default is white. And that, you know, and that everyone else is different. Like, I'm the normal one, so how come you're different? And that's why I said at the beginning, I hope they have some good advisors. They need to get Ibram X. Kendi on speed dial and really dig into what it means to be anti-racist.
Yeah.
Well, and that's part of the challenge I have with this as well, because again, to the point that you all have already made, they don't have a white family on there asking why people are white. And then you begin to think, does a kid who watches this then start to ask those types of questions of their friends who might be black in school because they saw it on Sesame Street? And a lot of times these characters, and look, we know this throughout history in this very country, a lot of times these characters can become caricatures. They can become the stereotypes that they're trying to prevent because, like Dominique said, they don't have good advisors. So I think really they should stick to what Sesame Street is good at, Tammy, which is what you talked about, which is accepting people by not trying to focus so exclusively on difference, but just telling the story with a lot of creative characters.
Well, yeah, and Sesame Street was about learning, but we didn't ask why Big Bird was big. You know what I'm saying? He just big. No, but I mean, he's the biggest thing on Sesame Street. We never broached the question of why Oscar the Grouch was in a trash can. We just knew he was in a trash can, and we were good with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're good with Oscar in the trash can. You know, we never asked what Elmo was. What is Elmo? Do any of y'all know?
They're all monsters to me. I mean, I take your point. I loved Sesame Street too as a kid growing up, and I forced my kid to watch it. I don't even know if he liked it.
So Ursula O says, "Where are the fat people on Sesame Street?" And eating sesame seeds will make you test positive on a random drug test. I don't no idea what that means.
Thank you.
Yeah, they better not ask no fat person on Sesame Street. Why are you fat? Right. Oh, hell gonna break loose. Let's leave it alone. Let's leave this thing alone.
Let's leave it alone.
Let's leave it alone.
I just think that, I think Sesame Street got caught up in the Black Lives Matter movement hype. I really think they did. There was no need for Sesame Street to do this. They didn't have to be Aunt Jemima and take the Aunt Jemima off of the syrup bottle. They didn't have to take Uncle Ben off of the rice. That's not who Sesame Street
needed a makeover, though, for sure. Alicia, you are a fool.
Didn't they have that mammoth character?
Yeah, they had the woolly mammoth. They did. Yeah.
See? Everybody's covered. Don't change Sesame Street.
As a matter of fact, the woolly mammoth was brown skin. So there we have it. We're going to take a quick break and come right back on the Tammy Mac Lady Show. Snuffleupagus. Thank you, Kevin. Snuffleupagus was his name. Yes. And we never quit.
Tammy Mac Show.
Welcome back to the Tammy Mac Lady Show on Fox Soul. We're about to wrap this thing up, so let's see where we're going to go now. Let's see. Congress is considering banning menthol cigarettes as cigarette companies have aggressively targeted the Black community. Now, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Black smokers smoke less but die of heart attacks, strokes, and other causes linked to tobacco use at a higher rate than white smokers do. 85% of Black smokers use Newport, Cool, and menthol. I can tell you, I've been to the store many a times to buy those for adults when I was a kid. They still People still smoking cigarettes? I thought that went out of style. Other menthol brands that are easier to become addicted to and harder to quit than plain tobacco, according to the Food and Drug Administration. So are they really trying to save our lives here?
Well, it's really controversial, right? Because people are addicted to those cigarettes. But I am always suspicious of products that are more deadly for you and are targeted to our community, right? It's like the malt liquors of the world. These are products that tend to be way worse for you. They're marketed exclusively towards us, and they're killing people in our community. And I do think they should be regulated. I do think they should be restricted, if not completely banned.
I actually agree with Dominique on this. I agree with her perspective 100%. I think when you have particular products that are disproportionately harmful and addictive to communities, especially the Black community, I think it's absolutely fine to regulate them at high rates. See, bipartisanship right there. If you were a senator from California, I was a senator from Kentucky, we could co-sponsor this legislation and get it done.
If Alicia wanted to filibuster us, we'd be
I love ending on this great note. I'm confused here. So it says, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Black smokers smoke less, but die of heart attacks, strokes, and other causes linked to tobacco, which means that these tobacco companies are intentionally putting more of something in these cigarettes that they are targeting to the Black community. Am I understand?
Well, the menthols and the flavored cigarettes go down easier. It's like, it's like the fruity flavored vapes and the fruity flavored alcoholic drinks. These are things that they target young people, kids, and they target people of color. And you don't notice that you're killing yourself, and that's part of the problem.
Well, you notice you're killing yourself with the malt liquor though, right?
If you're too drunk, you might not, but yeah, But again, these are products that are specifically hyper targeting Black people and that are more lethal and that do have special additives just for us that are not good for you.
So then I have it correct when I say they're targeting us, knowingly putting more poison in the cigarettes that they're selling us.
The argument they might make is that you're choosing to buy the cigarettes. Of course, we know that cigarettes are addictive, which is why it's important, I think, you have this type of legislation where you simply don't make them available. It's the same way that you had legislation with cigarettes earlier where you made it illegal to target to kids, because you could say, oh, well, a kid is choosing to buy a cigarette, but it's also a child. So there are ways that you can prevent addiction from occurring, especially with stronger cigarettes, and I think this would be a good way to do that.
Well, look, at this point, why don't they just take cigarettes off the shelf? I mean, they have completely torn the tobacco companies apart. Like, I'm surprised the tobacco, you could tell how much money they've made from cigarette smokers, because after all the money that they had to pay out in these lawsuits, these civil lawsuits, they're still thriving. That's amazing to me. They should have been bankrupt years ago, if you ask me.
But they just increased the price of the pack. The prices is so expensive to get a pack of cigarettes. And I don't know who can afford them. And that's why people that are poor were resourceful and started selling them one at a time, calling loosies and loose cigarettes. Because a lot of people can't afford to buy the whole pack. So they'll buy one at a time. When people want to get their fix, they know how to do it.
So what do you think about this whole cigarette situation?
I think exactly what Dr. Oleka and Dominique said. It's just, the bottom line is they know what they're doing. They're marketing it towards us. And we have already certain health conditions that make us preconditioned to a lot of this stuff. And it's just not working out well for us. And we have to, in the words of Dr. Oleka and Nancy Reagan, just say no.
And on that note, I'm going to say goodbye, everybody. I'm glad that we ended on all in agreement on a topic here tonight. So Alicia, thank you. Dr. Oleka and Dominique DiPrima, appreciate you for being here each and every Friday. Until Monday, everybody, it's a blessing to be in your box. Bye, y'all.